Wow, you returned for another video? You gluttons for punishment. Welcome to part 2 of this Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl analysis. Stalker was a landmark game with broad industry fallout. In this analysis, we're examining Shadow of Chernobyl in detail to determine why it endears itself to many players, me included. And in case you missed the video title, yes, there was a part 1. Do us a favour and watch it first, as the analysis is structured to mirror the Stalker's journey from Bandit Burrito to Monolith Molar. In part 1, I examined Shadow of Chernobyl's troubled development and how it impacted the final release. I also detailed what the zone is and how it operates. Finally, I examined the notorious early game and how it shapes initial impressions about Shadow of Chernobyl. I also stated why those impressions are false. Stalker has much more to offer. Part 2 continues the perilous Stalker journey to examine how the experience transforms with players. This isn't a game which plays the same from beginning to end. Shadow of Chernobyl may have a shaky beginning, but it's one of those rare games which are worth persisting through, as we'll see. Before we begin, this video is brought to you by my awesome patrons. If you enjoy my work and want to water the channel and help it grow, consider checking my Patreon, link is in the description. Patrons get monthly updates, their name in the credits, and early access to videos as a way of saying thanks. I'm investigating alternate support platforms if Patreon isn't your bottle of bourbon. Keep an eye on the channel notifications, I'll post an update on this soon. In these shifting times of encroaching AI, I'll point out that this channel is 110% human effort. Why 110%? Because blood, sweat and tears evaporate. Research, writing, editing, production, all Blondie. It's a lot of work, which is why patron support is cherished and contributes to the longevity of the channel. Hey, there's something else you can do which doesn't cost a dime, because we don't use dimes in Australia, the koalas can't pick them up. I'd be grateful if you subscribe, thumb the video, and drop a comment to notify the algorithm that Blondie is worth watching. It's as free as the air we breathe, though I'm sure they'll tax that soon. Welcome to the conversation, and good hunting, Stalker. I detailed GSC's ambition in creating a groundbreaking FPS title in part 1 of the analysis. They made many compromises, but one thing which staunchly remained was freedom. No, not the glassy-eyed faction. The freedom to explore, the freedom to backtrack, the freedom to exist in a world whose clockwork machinations continued to tick-tock around the player, regardless of their participation. Shadow of Chernobyl was GSC's attempt at a sandbox first-person shooter, a place where players could whittle the hours role-playing a fearless artifact hunter in a radiation-ravaged wasteland. Something I didn't make clear in part 1 is that I believe Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl has 3 distinct phases which players enter. Less skilled players may never reach the final phase, but it's there, waiting to be discovered. Did I just throw down a gauntlet? Kinda. In the gameplay section of part 1, I examined the first phase, which I affectionately call the hazing. This period is defined by fresh-faced confusion and brutal lessons for first-time players. For returning players, it marks a period of tight inventory management, rampant scavenging, and calculated encounters. There's a hint for first-timers. The second phase is coming right up. The third phase? Whoa, one phase at a time, partner. With the welts from the early game still stinging their skin, players enter Phase 2, which begins around the Rostock and Wild Territory regions. It's here where play morphs from hard knocks to this rocks, and it happens as quickly as a single weapon and armor upgrade. Shadow of Chernobyl's items borrow influence from classic RPG systems, where new gear represents a jump in ability. As players progress north in Shadow of Chernobyl, they're exposed to progressively powerful weaponry and armor, which fuel bolder exploration into areas considered dangerous for undergeared stalkers. It's one foot in front of the other, no missed steps, but with growing confidence. Weapons are bought from vendors, dropped by enemies, or friends, am I right, stalkers? Or found in the wild. Armor is sold by vendors, earned by completing special tasks, or found in specific locations, making it a rarer, more valuable commodity. Much like the Gothic series developed by Piranha Bytes, new armor and weapons are tangible upgrades which are pivotal to player progression. The impact of new gear is immediately felt in combat or artifact hunts. Shots which may have once killed players become survivable, and weapons pack greater punch, dropping threats quicker and with greater efficiency. Better armor not only protects from bullets and mutants, but also from radiation. Some armor is even effective against elemental damage. High-tiered armor has interesting trade-offs, allowing players a soft character build tailored to specific conditions. For example, the exoskeleton, the holy grail for many stalkers, has superior combat protection but is weak against anomalies. Furthermore, players can't run while wearing it, which is a serious consideration when slow movement can mean a quick death. It increases the low carry weight though, which sweetens the pot for many. The weapon roster isn't huge, and players can easily find them all as each faction favours different weapons. The time between discovering new weapons is long enough to encourage players to experiment with what they have. There's nothing to discourage picking a favourite, but gear progression teases the power of new guns as they appear. Weapon drops breadcrumb the player toward progressively better gear and ensure that they're adequately powered to meet the next challenge. Weapons and armour deteriorate with use, making them less effective. Neither can be repaired, which further encourages ditching old kit and embracing the path ahead. If Shadow of Chernobyl's weapons were a tech tree from an RTS, they'd be linear upgrades for much of the game. The final allure of new weapons, yes, I deliberately left this until last, is increased accuracy and damage. Almost every new weapon players grab is a significant increase in accuracy and power over what they're currently using. This remains true until the late game when specialist weapons become available. It's like the protagonist is sobering through the game after a month-long bender and slowly remembers how to aim. Weapon attachments begin to appear, guns with underslung grenade launchers or scopes which broaden their versatility. The psychological effect of finding these guns can't be understated. The transition out of the hobo phase, as it's known among the community, is quick and celebratory as players realize the new power they possess. Once they have their first scoped weapon, there's no looking back. Get it? No looking back because they're looking down a scope? No? Blin. I hate to say it, but this is where the game conventionally gets good. This is where player skill and game mechanics intersect, where the rubber meets the road, and rewards player accuracy with more consistent headshots and economical gunplay. It puts the early game shenanigans in stark contrast with a combat loop which is fun to engage. Weapons have punch, enemies stagger when hit, and headshots are often fatal. Accuracy isn't perfect in this phase. Shots will miss their mark, but the radius for stray shots tightens with each new weapon. This point in the game is the perfect baseline for Shadow of Chernobyl's combat. This is the combat which new players should have when they first step out of Cid's bunker. Difficulty is balanced in other ways, such as enemy variety, faction loadouts, and player armor. An artificial ball gag and hogtie wasn't necessary. I read somewhere, ages ago, that Shadow of Chernobyl originally had no difficulty setting. It was shoved in on a directive to make the game accessible to more players. Originally, Shadow of Chernobyl was a brutal hardcore experience, if you can believe it, with a quick time to kill for players and NPCs. I couldn't verify this information for the video, so take it with a grain of salt, but it might explain why difficulty is artificial in the opening hours. Phase 2 of gameplay ushers a renewed sense of exploration, as much of gameplay mechanics as of the world. Players rely on sighted shots instead of blind hipfire. Well, the smart ones do. If you still hipfire at everything, then you are objectively playing Stalker wrong. Don't at me in the comments, you hipfiring heathens. Many weapons have multiple fire modes, usually fully automatic, 3-round burst, single fire, or a combination of each. There are also alternate ammo types for each caliber, a standard round and a high-powered round which does more damage. Players begin to experiment with these options, with each having a purpose. For example, in open areas with good visibility, it's preferable to switch to single fire, where there's breathing room to scope targets. In tight areas or places where the danger is unknown, fully automatic is better, in case players are jumped and something needs to die quick. Players will get jumped. Perceptive players may realize that the crouch and low crouch tighten the reticle and improve accuracy, a bigger consideration in Stalker's combat than many conventional shooters. Stalker isn't a combat sim, but it borrows elements from the genre which make tactical combat a natural and rewarding way to play. Shadow of Chernobyl has as much in common with cover shooters like Gears of War as it does a traditional shooter. Combat design is predicated on shooting from the protection of cover instead of chest bumping a hail of bullets. Standing in the open during a firefight will bury foolish stalkers. Enemies attempt to flank players, swarm them with numbers, or flush them with grenades, meaning that if the fight is close, players must move between cover to avoid getting smoked out. Despite the jank, enemy AI is cunning at times, exhibiting a combat intelligence which borders on scary. Even when the weird shenanigans are on display, players can never discount that the AI won't suddenly go John Wick and dome them from 100 meters with a pistol. That's what I love about Shadow of Chernobyl's enemies, their unpredictability. It's appreciated during this phase, when players can enjoy combat and not have to worry about blowing their nuts off in a panic. The AI was impressive in 2007, and it holds up in 2024, to some degree. The AI DNA has passed through 2 additional Stalker games and numerous mod packs since Shadow of Chernobyl, and I've witnessed devious behaviour from enemies, a testament to the potential coded into them. Outside the combat loop, players transition from barely scraping by to hoarding a functional inventory which Sid would be proud of. Scavenging resources is an inseparable part of the Stalker identity, the indelible mark of an experienced Stalker. Let's discuss looting and scavenging in video games. They are not the same. Looting is the act of collecting valuables from enemies or the environment. There's usually a functional need for the items, but players could bypass many of these drops and be no worse off. Scavenging is driven by existential need and is self-preservative in the face of danger. The danger doesn't have to be a physical threat like mutant attacks or hostile stalkers. Hunger, bleeding, radiation, and running out of bullets are equally dangerous, and unprepared stalkers will perish. Scavenging differs by implying a literal or perceived threat to the player. In the case of hunger, the threat is measurable and unstoppable. I have a static amount of time until I die if I don't eat. A lack of bandages is harder to qualify, but the threat is clear. If players take bleeding damage and they can't heal with bandages, they bleed out. The question then turns to how many of these items are enough. When does scavenging become looting? The line between scavenger and looter is blurred by circumstance, and Shadow of Chernobyl may see players cross this line innumerable times during an adventure. There's a philosophical debate to be had around every action a Stalker takes in the zone, whether it's moral and just and qualified by need. No faction exemplifies the scavenger better than loners. They keep to themselves, wish no one ill will, and are genuinely curious about the zone. Many wish to simply explore the zone and make a buck off the artifacts they find, but most are ill-equipped for the hardships and must scavenge supplies to get by. Loners are beset by opportunistic factions whose primary motive is greed, directly or indirectly, but even well-equipped factions fall prey to circumstance and hard luck, and their situation turns from looting to scavenging. Stalker has many philosophical quandaries like this, lurking in musty corners, waiting to be discussed. Is there a clear line separating the two? Is it really that simple? Drop into the comments, tell me what you think. Scavenging off the dead isn't the only way to get stuff. Most items can be bought from vendors at faction camps across the zone. Vendors are a savvy bunch and reveal better wares as player reputation grows. They're a reliable source of bullets and medication, and they also sell weapons and armor for a price. Trading with vendors is essential unless you're a bleeding masochist. They offer the best sale price and have unlimited cash, unlike normal NPCs. That's right, players can trade with NPCs who roam the zone. They offer meds, food, and minor items, but occasionally may have an artifact. Trading with other stalkers is convenient but not economical. Their prices are horrible, overcharging when they sell and paying under market value when they buy. But the convenience of offloading excess gear shouldn't be casually dismissed. Players can't take everything with them. There's a weight limit, remember? NPC trade was a cool system. It fostered a sense of brotherhood and community which reached beyond gameplay to draw players into the world. Players grew invested in this place when they saw others doing stuff too. There was a sense of friendly, sometimes not so friendly, rivalry among stalkers. They felt like a genuine community, like gym rat bodybuilders kissing those peaks, or tradies sweating a living under the harsh Aussie sun. Both happy to share tips and to chuckle with others, but never losing sight of why they were there. Players can complete tasks for cash and gear. Task givers in faction outposts offer endless stuff to do, and this is the best way to get geared early. Players might be asked to purge a mutant pack, retrieve items, or attack hostile factions. During Phase 2, players become more considerate of the effort needed to complete these tasks. Purging mutants sounds like an easy task, but if all the reward money is spent replacing ammo and meds, where was the net gain? Tasks passively encourage better economy and a deliberate approach from players. The reward is always worth it, if they don't go overboard. Tasks push exploration into new areas. They fuse with the loot and progression loops, enticing players with the prospect of new landmarks to explore, hidden caches to find, or environmental storytelling to discover. Tasks are the lifeblood of the Stalker experience, a constant which players can rely on when a region has been picked clean and the ambient mutants have been culled. I have a couple of gripes with tasks. First, generic tasks never show what the reward is before completion, so it's hard to gauge whether the effort is worth it. This is a minor issue, as anyone needing cash should do tasks regardless. The bigger issue is compulsory tasks. These are usually defense tasks, and players will recognize them when they appear because they'll be nowhere near a task giver. Compulsory tasks are automatically added to the player's task lists, and that's fine, but if the player is nowhere near the action or is hurrying to another destination, the task often fails, which incurs a reputation hit. Functionally, this isn't a big deal unless players are flirting the fine line between decency and banditry, but it's annoying to have random tasks shoved on me, then penalise me for not immediately dropping everything to babysit whatever drama is unfolding over yonder. If I'm hauling a payday of artifacts and I'm near the weight limit, I'm sure as shit not going to stop for a bandit skirmish. It's like someone's dog crapped on the sidewalk and a random pedestrian gives you stink eye because you walked away from it. Speaking of faction warfare, there's plenty of it. Every faction has enemies that would love to see them swept from the zone in a crashing flood of bullets and blood. Human conflict is a constant in Shadow of Chernobyl and is cherished by many longtime players. This was a fun feature back in the day. On top of injecting ideological motivations to the diverse stalkers of the zone, it made for incredible dynamic battles which sprung from nowhere and served as standalone set pieces thanks to their scope, setting, or context. These could happen almost anywhere and ensured that no two playthroughs were the same. They also made for great campfire storytelling. Players can't join factions in Shadow of Chernobyl, but they can complete faction-specific tasks for loot and to boost their standing with that faction. Faction vendors open more of their wares and drop prices for stalkers who prove themselves loyal. Shrewd players may notice that factions can be played against each other for personal gain. Duty and freedom hate each other and constantly vie for the upper hand in the zone. Players can step between this power struggle, completing tasks for both sides while actively ensuring that neither emerge on top. Perhaps they want to see one side triumph over the other and guide events accordingly. This brings obvious benefits like faction-specific gear and lower prices, but can have broader implications for the security of the zone. I can't undersell the strength of this feature, largely handled by independent faction AI and the omnipresent A-Life. The dynamism of Stalker games is a significant selling point, and faction conflict plays a big role in making the zone feel alive with conviction and motive. Whether it's the commitment of duty, the harmony of freedom, or the shady goals of the mercenaries, this clash of cultures ensures that excitement is rarely far away. Even when nothing's happening, the anticipation of what may happen is a strong motivator to continue bushwhacking. Many longtime fans enjoy this aspect of Stalker the most, so much so that faction warfare became a standalone game mode in the Stalker Anomaly mod pack. Let's shift focus to one of the stars of the setting. Artifacts are scattered across the zone, atop piles of radioactive junk, and littering the ground like someone burst a bag of Skittles. Artifacts grant superhuman feats such as resisting elemental damage, boosting stamina, and making mainstream games media rational and honest. Ha! I wish that last one were true, I'd never leave the zone. They supplement playstyle in subtle ways, though stacked bonuses can provide a powerful, in some cases overpowered, advantage. Stacking enough stamina recovery artifacts, for example, allows players to sprint indefinitely. Balance? That's for acrobats and architects. Artifacts have negative effects which must be balanced. Many artifacts irradiate the wearer, but some reduce statistics or exacerbate other negative effects. Finding a balance of artifacts is an ongoing trial which layers onto the journey. By swapping artifacts, players can be better protected in a firefight, are more resistant to anomaly damage, or are able to heal faster. It's gratifying to discover which artifacts are best for certain situations, but the greatest strength of this system is there's no wrong answer. If players make their artifacts play nice together, then it's a valid combination. For the artifacts players don't want, there's hard cash. Artifacts are commodities unique to the zone and fetch a high price. The greater the power of an artifact, the more valuable it is, but the greater the risk in retrieving it. Is it worth risking your neck to cross an electro anomaly for a luminescent lump of rock? Only players know the answer. Shrewd stalkers may notice that a specific vendor pays a premium for artifacts. Lucrative sales offer big incentive for players to backtrack and recover a haul of artifacts. It's this mechanism, combined with recurring tasks, which allows roleplay of the life of a stalker. Each trip into the wilderness becomes a standalone adventure. I lost countless hours in Stalker to hoarding a rock collection and offloading it for profit. With an economy as pinched as Shadow of Chernobyl's, the cash is worth the effort. Un momento, por favor. The game explains that artifacts are formed in anomalies. This implies that they should also be found near them. The reality is different. Artifacts are everywhere in the southern regions, sometimes nowhere near an anomaly. It's like the fucking Ballarat gold rush. Stalkers can stand anywhere and 3 artifacts are in arm's reach. There's no challenge to recovering these artifacts, and they're so ubiquitous that the market price should have cratered ages ago. It robs artifact recovery of the necessary tension and danger. This was a disappointment at release, though I didn't see many complaints about it at the time. Artifacts dry up as the player travels north, dragging them from feast to famine. Some of this absence is driven by the random artifact spawns. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes not. But this could have been balanced better. The only artifacts the player is interested in this late in the game are high-tier stat boosters. There are no vendors north of Army Warehouse region, and players want utility, not cash. Yet there are plenty of low-level artifacts to clog the inventory. Stalkers also seem pathologically comfortable parading the crushed remains of fellow stalkers on their belt. How do you think some of these artifacts are formed? Read the artifact descriptions, then read between the lines. How does it feel now, coveting that crushed pelvis? Anomalies are the persistent hazards which remain after the mutant dogs and bloodsuckers and unfriendly NPCs have smoked lead. They're the one obstacle no stalker can ignore, humming and buzzing their excitable warning. By now, players can identify them and may even have strategies to safely navigate them. The sudden urgent bip of the detector is nerve-wracking if you haven't spotted danger. Anomalies crackle with a life and energy felt as much as seen. Turn the speakers up and the background noise down. Anomalies always announce their presence. That's what I like about them in Shadow of Chernobyl. They're fair. All anomalies have a visual or audio cue, a telltale sign that they're around, and learning what these are is a rite of passage. My lone criticism of anomalies is the proximity beep. It trivializes the danger anomalies present, to a degree, offering leniency where players should rely on their senses. Recent Stalker mod packs addressed this issue, providing an option to disable the alert. It makes for deliciously tense exploration as players must pay close attention to their surroundings, instead of recklessly crashing through the scrub like an Embracer Group investor sniffing out a blood-soaked payday. Players range far to fulfill their scavenging needs. Exploration is a huge part of Shadow of Chernobyl's appeal, and is more accessible once players are properly geared. The dark setting hides its beauty in the sunset reprieve, the morning fog, the rusted railway yard, and a train track severed by a mysterious power sphere. I've never felt more compelled to explore a bleak world such as Stalker's. The history of the region lies written on the peeling paint of Soviet wall art, and the children's toys scattered among piles of brick, dusted with decades-old mortar. Piles of gnawed human bone write a starker, more recent history. GSC employee Valentin Yeltashev stated in an interview, quote, "The player is free to explore the zone. It is full of hiding places and additional routes." End quote. This middle section of the game, the part where players get better gear and learn about the zone, is where this freedom is fully realized. Care was taken to craft a setting which players wanted to explore. The tantalizing possibility of a new discovery drives each expedition into the wild. Stalkers rarely return empty-handed, and thrilling tales of survival become their own reward. Shadow of Chernobyl's world is a product of the time. Hardware and engine limitations carved the zone as much as creative vision or real-world visits. Forests contain a handful of trees, and open spaces have empty spots with little going on. To GSC's credit, they fill as much detail as possible. 2007 was an era where theatre of the mind was still prevalent in game design. Back then, because points of interest were cleverly spaced, Shadow of Chernobyl felt dense with adventure, and it expertly breadcrumbed players around each region. Over time, you appreciate the many moods and callous fancies of the zone. Sometimes melancholy, other times violent, the zone exhibits a memorable personality that would make Robin Williams blush. This characterization of the zone, that whimsy of human familiarity, is one reason why Shadow of Chernobyl stuck with many who braved her tempest. There's an odd comfort to the simple rules she plays by and breaks without notice, a certainty that no matter how alone a stalker feels, she's always there, sometimes willing each step, other times dragging it. She's a powerful example of setting as a character. Distinct, omnipresent, mysterious. Many stalkers won't admit it, but for all its danger and hardship, the zone is why they return. Pockets of radiation persist from the 1986 Chernobyl explosion, and they guide exploration. Areas in a region can be soft-gated until players have better radiation resistance. This Metroidvania-light progression maintains an air of mystery within each region. There are inaccessible areas which players can return to once they have better gear, further incentivizing exploration. What treasures lay beyond the metallic palette and itching skin? Get a better suit and find out. Maps are open with few artificial barriers and allow a surprising freedom to explore and bypass obstacles. There's rarely a single correct way to approach a situation. For example, highly irradiated areas are dangerous to the ill-equipped, but stalkers with inadequate armor can boost radiation resistance with artifacts and meds. Shadow of Chernobyl is also surprisingly lenient, allowing players to climb stuff for a superior vantage point, scramble through a shortcut, or scale structures to navigate past danger. The best comparison of this design is Ion Storm's Deus Ex, but even the mighty DX, and I do love DX, falls short of Shadow of Chernobyl's freeform approach. Enemy bases have multiple ways in, encouraging players to approach the situation as they see fit. Players can strategize and take stock, or they can charge through the nearest opening and hope for the best. Shadow of Chernobyl never holds them back. The open world is bespoke but never empty. Enemy checkpoints respawn, and random stalkers and mutants repopulate most regions, meaning that players get a different experience every time they re-enter a region. Artifacts also respawn, spicing the loot game. This dynamism is at the heart of every fan mod pack, a feature greatly expanded to deliver surprising variation for a fresh experience every time. Consecutive plays of Stalker are fresher than Jeff Keighley's hairstyle. Every random encounter is surprising and opportunistic. Aside from the scripted events which propel the plot, these encounters are free form. It's AI reacting in as organic a manner as was possible for the time. Stalkers would travel through a region on their way to an unknown destination, which you could guess by observing them, and you could even beat them there. Mutants would gather in packs and prowl for a meal. This was incredible behavior for 2007. Players could use encounters to wipe out rival factions, gather more loot, or trade with other stalkers. Best of all, these opportunities would constantly pop up. Stashes, a venerable Stalker trademark, are another reason to venture into the wilderness. Stashes have become synonymous with Stalker since Shadow of Chernobyl's release, and no other franchise makes me excited to uncover a hidden cache like Stalker. It's a genuine treasure hunt, sleuthing out the hidden location of someone's loot. Some stashes are easily identified as rusted toolboxes or containers, but others are cleverly tucked into tree stumps or inside rusted pipes. Players who are never curious about their surroundings will miss a lot of loot. Some items aren't hidden inside containers, but tucked into alcoves or lying on the ground. My favourite weapon of the game, the Vintar BC sniper rifle, is in plain view on the ground. Players can single-mindedly pursue the plot, but it's to the detriment of Shadow of Chernobyl's true appeal, the freewheeling sense of adventure. Failure to explore is failure to engage in Shadow of Chernobyl's core gameplay loop. The game provides the tools and motive. The rest is up to curiosity. The concept of personal stashes is never conveyed to players, but those storage boxes are enticing. Enterprising players may realize that any container can act as a personal stash, allowing them to dump armloads of loot for later retrieval. This plays to a design concept we now know as the extraction shooter, the act of accruing loot to bring back to a base or camp for later use. Stalker managed this organically through technical design and intrinsic motivation. Players desire more items than they can carry, those filthy loot goblins. This delayed item utility was common in RPGs for decades, but Stalker was beating a new path for shooters. Before Stalker, System Shock 2's object permanence appears to have been the closest thing to our modern understanding of extraction shooter design, allowing players to dump items into the central lift, which made them available on almost all decks of the Von Braun. Not quite the same, and not as satisfying as dropping them into a secure container, but the bones of the concept was there. Shadow of Chernobyl inadvertently evolved this idea. There's nothing to stop players using any container as a permanent stash and base of operation. Stalker's stashes remind me of the games my brother and I used to play as kids, collecting our wealth of play money, acrylic gems, and a trench coat full of toy guns, distributing them among friends, and hiding them around the house in places no one would find them. Many egos were bruised in those shootouts. Stalker lets me relive those memories in a mature setting, and the novelty hasn't faded with time. Cache hunting in video games is awesome. I took the extraction shooter formula and transposed it into Season 2 of my Stalker Anomaly Loner to Legend longplay on the Blondfire channel. It's a perfect fit for survival in the exclusion zone. There's a link to the longplay in the description of this video. The underground areas of the zone are the ultimate gut check for a stalker. Literally, if they mess it up. The claustrophobic concrete halls are oppressive, the fear suffocating, like trying to chew stale bread. Distant metallic groans, flashing lights, and long shadows heighten the state of alert. These places, with their abandoned Soviet hardware, don't feel like a tomb, so much as a lair. There's gnawed evidence that whatever lurks in these places is hungry, and the hissing anomalies and harsh orange light set the jangling nerves ablaze with tension. Shadow of Chernobyl's horror is a spider clinging to the ceiling above you. You hunch and contort, but the discomfort of knowing it's beyond your grasp, observing patiently, biding time, is almost unbearable. The horror plays to the unique brutalist strengths of the setting, stranding players inside the tortured confines of their own head. Bespoke jump scares maintain tension while exploring these areas. Delicious, distracting anecdotes until the stars of the show arrive. The claustrophobia felt while wandering the underground is personal, an encroachment on comfort boundaries and physical space. You can taste the stale air and disturbed dust on each breath. There are no distractions down here, no random faction battles or miraculous interruptions. Nothing to derail the impending doom. The underground labs are dangerous, more so than the expansive zone above. Sometimes there's a point of no return, where traveling back to the entrance is impossible and players must find another way out. If you run out of resources down here, you've run out of options, and your bones belong to the glittering eyes in the dark. The timid beam of your flashlight feels as fragile as the tiny chemical reaction it feeds upon, and does little to alleviate primal fears of dark, dank, underground places. Players have good reason to fear the underground. Shadow of Chernobyl's most terrifying creatures dwell here, safeguarding their domain with ravenous glares and jagged mouths. The underground labs are Shadow of Chernobyl's most iconic areas, more so than the power plant. The scat-inducing experience of exploring them sticks with players long after they emerge from darkness and lap the sweet tang of a radioactive breeze topside. No matter how often I visit these places, I always feel an overwhelming sense of relief when I return to the surface, without fail. That's the power of Stalker's oppressive subterrane. You feel it in your shoulders, back and neck, every muscle tight with trepidation. Did I bring enough ammo and medkits? Am I overweight? Is this armor adequate? Do I look fat in this armor? Are the spawns where they should be? Or is it different this time? Unlike topside, when the monsters crawl out, there's nowhere to run. It's unsurprising that players realize that the zone is not their friend. It doesn't play by quaint human concepts of morality, justice, or fairness. It's a cold, brutal, depressive place, pushing down with the full inalienable weight of forces beyond the player's comprehension. Whatever rules are established on its sandy shores can and will be washed away without notice and replaced with grit and sticky clay. The manual warns of what's in store. Quote, "As a stalker, you will awake with no knowledge of your past and little hope for your future." End quote. Paints a pretty picture, doesn't it? Phase 2 is marked by personal growth. Those who survive have adapted to the fickle whims of the zone, learned to play by her rules, fleeting as they may be. Preparation, observation, caution, deliberation. Competencies of a stalker who has a passing shot at survival. The player begins to feel it, to sense the subtle hidden rhythm of this dance, and swings their hips to the beat. It's all in the hips.
It's all in the hips.
There's a spiritual aspect to the zone which I rarely see talked about, an unspoken religion which all stalkers ascribe to on some level. It's a necessity to combat the overwhelming nihilism of the setting as the light flees from another day. Thou shalt congregate by fires. Thou shalt play uplifting music. Thou shalt drink vodka. Thou shalt joke and make merry and recount tales of survival. Thou shalt philosophize the meaning of the zone, the meaning of self, and the meaning of life. Thou shalt ease the suffering of thy fellow stalkers. These tenets aren't found in a wiki. They come naturally to those absorbed by this dark beauty. It's interesting behavior, not only among stalkers as characters, but stalkers as players. Any player who has spent a long period in the zone displays many, if not all, of these qualities. It's an unwritten rule to help fellow stalkers, to discuss the minutiae of weapon components, to strategize and pick apart the details, to impart the best regions for farming a given artifact, and to share ghost stories around a virtual fire. This is the trade of a stalker. They deal not in weapons and artifacts, but in intangibles, the scraps of knowledge which permit the sun to rise one more day. That's why Hey Blondie's brother channel, Blondfire, exists, to capture these stories live, to live the ghost stories in terrifying close calls, to teach deeper gameplay mechanics to those who find them daunting, to live out the highly personal experience that each player has on their own journey, and to draw others to the warmth of the campfire to share these stories with. The Stalker community is unlike any other. We are brothers and sisters. We are family, bonded by our love of the zone and the dangers we've faced. Most won't understand us, won't see what we see in the zone, but that's okay. Even in a single-player game like Shadow of Chernobyl, that bond is keenly felt. This is what gaming is about, bringing people together. By extension, while the zone holds its share of malice and ill intent, stalkers have opportunity to exhibit kindness and compassion. Players can intervene in a hopeless situation to save lives. Players can offer medical aid to those in death's clutches. Perhaps, in time, players can even forgive Randy Pitchford for this.
Nobody likes a bigot unless he's crying boo-hoo.
For everything the zone demands, for the bottomless greed and depravity on display, the selfless spark of humanity is also found here, brighter than ever by contrast. Players may never arrive at this conclusion. To some, it will always be a game and nothing more. But to others, it's a mirror for the soul, a place of reflection, reconciliation, and of finding oneself. Some of us don't come to the zone to vanish. We come here to be found. Phase 2 is the longest phase for new players, but it marks a shift in gameplay, becoming a skill-driven, rewarding experience. Mechanical contrivances are swept aside as fresh possibility blooms, revitalizing the gameplay loop and providing new value to chase. I wonder how many missed the Shadow of Chernobyl experience because they gave up early. I wouldn't be shocked if the number was high. This is the reward which awaits players who persist. There's a final phase, better than the last, more fulfilling in every measurable way, the pinnacle of stalking the zone. Mastery. It's here where stalkers demonstrate an innate understanding of the zone, a harmonization which borders on clairvoyant. Stalkers so attuned seem to know when mutants will attack, where the best artifacts are, when not to push their luck, and when Half-Life 3 is coming. They know when to be cautious and when to be quick, how much ammo is enough, and act on instinct when things go askew. It sounds like simple mastery of mechanics until you remember that much of Shadow of Chernobyl's encounters are random. A-Life is the puppeteer without a plan. Mastery requires other qualities. There's obviously immense satisfaction to arriving at this phase. There isn't a clear finish line to reach mastery. Rather, it's the sudden startling realization that things are going well, and that players feel prepared, even in dangerous areas. Shots land with precision as better weapons become available. Players realize that headshots are not only possible, they're devastating, often KOing NPCs with a single shot. High-caliber weapons skew the playing field to favor the skilled marksman. At first, the AI marksmen benefit. As players attain mastery, the high-powered weapons favor them instead. Players can not only navigate anomalies, they exploit them to trigger brief windows to pass unmolested. Artifact hunting and retrieval becomes second nature, and the low-tech bolt becomes priceless. During this phase, stalkers live up to their namesake, turning the tables on the vicious mutants and hostile factions. They exhibit the cunning and intelligence of their prey while remaining 2 steps ahead. The smug dominance which arose in Phase 2 is absent with mastery. Players understand that the zone is unpredictable and that sometimes preparation, caution, and cunning aren't enough to repel a furious attack and poor luck. Sometimes shit happens. When shit does happen, the Master distinguishes themselves. They are cool under pressure, when the bullets are flying and the blood is flowing and the cheeky is at its breakiest. Their ability to prioritize in the thick of the action is a skill vastly underappreciated by the previous two phases. This skill saves the Master Stalker from many gruesome ends. Mastering this skill has grown complex with recent mod packs like Anomaly and Gamma, but the core competency in Shadow of Chernobyl is strong enough to deserve respect. Skirting death where others would perish is a rush, a pronounced feeling thanks to the unpredictability of the setting, a euphoric motivator to learn the trade and become the stuff of legend. Importantly, mastery rewards competent play without trivializing encounters. Enemies sling tough lead and are often a step ahead of the player's weapon damage. Getting hit by a high caliber round or explosives is no joke, no matter how armored the player is or what difficulty they play on. Mastery isn't a phase which every player will achieve. Thankfully, they don't have to for a good time. Shadow of Chernobyl is forgiving from the mid-game onwards, even on mastered difficulty, ensuring there are numerous ways to find better gear. Once accuracy tightens, gunplay is sublime, aside from some frustrating spots in the Pripyat region. It's impossible to deny, however, that mastering Shadow of Chernobyl's setting is the superior way to play, and is achievable to a lesser degree on a first play, provided players engage the systems and pay attention. Shadow of Chernobyl isn't a casual shooter. It wasn't designed to be. There's a complexity to the moving parts for any who care to look, and the reward for figuring things out is immeasurable. This is one reason I couldn't tear myself from Stalker in 2007, and why I frequently returned to the zone years afterward, eager to divine more pieces of the whole for deeper understanding. GSC's original vision of Shadow of Chernobyl was to allow players the freedom to explore. They achieved that to some degree, but there's a distinct cutover point, a sign that this phase of development might have been artificially pushed over the line by a concerned publisher. From Radar Region onwards, players are funneled through a ball-tearing gauntlet of encounters. The pace of the story becomes relentless, with no vendors, side tasks, or other distractions to derail it. Players can return to southern regions, and can come and go as they please, but like microtransactions in a single-player game, it's pointless. If players aren't well equipped by this point, enemy loot and numerous caches make it pointless to turn back. It'll be rough going with poor threads, but new armor isn't hard to find. I struggled to keep my inventory slim during this section of play. It was always overflowing with ammo, food, meds and artifacts, and I had to toss good loot away to keep what I already had. Recall that I played on Master difficulty, where loot is scarcer, supposedly. I've always found this section the most disappointing of Shadow of Chernobyl's gameplay. It feels rushed compared to the careful, open-ended gameplay of previous regions. There's little intrinsic reason to explore these locations as a new player, which is a shame because they're among the most interesting. Mechanically, players are given everything they need to encourage a final push to the center of the zone, to the exclusion of all else. I could be wrong, but the northern areas have the streamlined focus of a THQ representative's input, a shedding of excess to shove the player to the end. This isn't a criticism of Dean Sharp, but an acknowledgement that there are two distinct modes of play with a clear line between them. I prefer the former mode, as do many, I'm sure. The lack of incentivized exploration makes Shadow of Chernobyl's later portion feel like a different game, linear and in line with conventional shooters, which is a disservice to the steady progression built to this point. The sudden shift in urgency couldn't quell my excitement at spotting the Chernobyl nuclear power plant for the first time. It was a thrilling moment, setting the heart to a rapturous thunder. This was the concrete and steel behemoth, the poisoned pulpit, the mystery at the root of it all. Here, dreams were made and broken. The power plant is faithfully modelled from GSC's visit to Chernobyl. Seeing it in-game was more than a powerful moment in gaming. It was a tour of a real-life location so dangerous that minutes of exposure in some areas was certain death. This was the closest many gamers would come to exploring the real-life zone and the Dark Mother residing over it. I could have kissed GSC for that. They'll have to settle for a salute now. The interior of the power plant is no doubt largely gamified for clashes with the fanatical Monolith faction, but there are sites which look authentic, such as the long hallways covered in spikes, which are cable runners, or the prop used in numerous locations, which looks like a miniature elephant's foot. That iconic, highly toxic corium flow composed of melted core, concrete, metals, and anything else which the lava-like slag burn through. I found the formation of the elephant's foot intensely fascinating back then, but even that paled to what lay at the heart of Chernobyl. players have the opportunity to ascend from the devastated pit of Reactor 4, which is filled with fractured rod housings and twisted metal. Overhead rests the 1,000-ton reactor lid, which was blown through the ceiling of the power plant in the 1986 explosion and landed on an angle, partially covering the hole it erupted from. Climbing up the rubble-filled pit is a haunting moment, powerful in a way which only this setting could rouse. Video game or not, the setting isn't fiction. This is a real place, filled with hazards which, if one were foolish and politically connected, they could visit. Such a poignant moment is free of distractions. No nagging companions, no enemies, nothing to steal the air from the moment. To see this terrifying wonder alone is worth the effort. As you stand there, dusting radioactive soot from your armor and listening to the echoed clack of shifting rubble, it's hard not to feel overwhelmed by the calm isolation of this place. If you, viewer, are fascinated by Chernobyl like I am, this moment will punch your solar plexus with an iron fist. The calm inside the sarcophagus feels like a betrayal of the people who suffered, a facade for the deadly chaos of a half-life with much life left to burn. The final push into the Chernobyl sarcophagus is fraught with resistance and the booming faceless voice which beckons. Monolith fanatics have made themselves cozy among the cobwebs, and they patrol the corridors in large numbers. Even well-prepared players must be cautious or face being overwhelmed. I enjoy these battles. They present a fun opportunity to pit skill against AI, to match efficiency against raw firepower. Cover shooting and careful progress are a must, but there are numerous armors to loot along the way and plenty of ammo to grab. Players are never wanting for resources, and this has always been disappointing. That preparation was tossed to favour expedient excess. The power plant battles could have presented a hearty challenge against dwindling supplies as much as innumerable nutjobs, but this opportunity is squandered, even on master difficulty. I'll discuss Shadow of Chernobyl's endings in the story section of the analysis, which is coming in part 3. A final point on the end game, the portal jumping finale across the power plant rooftop needs a mention. Aside from being narratively bankrupt and contrived to pad game length, the screen shakes periodically from the waves of power. The moment players enter this area, they're assaulted by grunts and snipers with each step. Players are expected to snipe enemies to advance, or risk a railgun-sized hole in the cranium. Gauss rifles are everywhere in this area, and they're the apex sniper rifle of the game. The screen shake makes return fire impossible, and it's not uncommon to be exposed and taking fire while waiting for the shakes to fuck off. Monolith suffer no such penalty. Of course, able to nail a get wrecked to your foreskin at half a click with a 360 no-scope while a magnitude 9 shirt fronts the fucking earth. It makes progress a slog and antithetical to the hard push for closure that the game encourages. Don't mind the fight, pointless as it is, hate the conditions. This section also drags for far too long, involving countless portal jumps and endless incoming fire. There's nothing stimulating about it, and there's zero narrative for why it exists, but that's a discussion for the story section. That finally brings us to a component of Shadow of Chernobyl as legendary as the anomalies, mutants, and bleak setting: bugs. Shadow of Chernobyl is infamous for its bugs, AI quirks, and instability. Bugs were prominent at launch, and forums filled with frustrated gamers looking for workarounds. After years of patching, many issues still remain. I have a list from my playthrough for this video. Let's see. Faux AI states, like this guy who thinks he's still downed.
Помогите! Люди, помогите!
Jiggle physics. Not those jiggle physics, unfortunately. Vanishing bodies. This was a good one.
Hadouken!
Whatever happened to this table? Hovering assets. Not technically a bug so much as an oversight. Grabbing items through solid objects. Funny, but not intended, I think. Quest trigger issues. These guys are supposed to wait until I talk to them before running off. To be fair, this mission could be on a timer. Oh, and this guy died afterwards, so I can never complete the task he gave me. Yay! Kentucky Fried Stalker. You see this a lot in the fan mod packs. And finally, numerous crashes to desktop. Then there's the frame drops and pauses during gameplay. I have a rig which crushes diamonds between its thighs, but Shadow of Chernobyl is a different beast. The underlying X-ray engine has limitations which became painfully apparent to modders and is well known among the community. While most settings are fine, cranking the view distance and grass density turns Shadow of Chernobyl into a slideshow. I repeat, you can't run Shadow of Chernobyl on max settings on your swanky quantum CPU, 500 terabytes of RAM, 50 petabyte NVMe SSD, and GeForce RTX 50K BFG Edition ultra crotch blasting GPU. Why? I'm not a programmer, how the hell should I know? Perhaps it's locked to single-threaded execution, that's common among older games, but there are likely far deeper causes which aren't worth getting into in the video. Frame drops only occur in some areas and aren't horrible so much as noticeable. Pauses, on the other hand, last long enough that I thought the game had locked up. This isn't a static image you're seeing, it's a pause, in real time. These happen more frequently than the frame drops and are annoying to wait out. I could only hazard a guess at why these occur, but this channel doesn't focus on deep technical details, so it's a moot point. The pauses never happened at inconvenient moments during my playthrough, but they could, and that's a problem. There's also a pervasive shadow at the edge of the screen, most visible while moving around the outdoor areas. Once seen, it's impossible to unsee, and it's a constant throughout play. While not an issue per se, it is distracting and unsightly. I don't believe that it was fully removed, even in the heavily optimized mod packs. The final issue, the one which pissed me off the most, was mouse clicks not registering properly while in the inventory. I had to click twice to select options in item context menus. This happened all the time when right-clicking an item and selecting an option, and it was an endless pain in the rectum, especially during firefights or tight encounters. Unloading weapons, using bandages or medkits, using anti-radiation meds, the sort of stuff you need to do on the fly took a second longer, a delay which, in Stalker, can mean death. It also made scavenging ammo from guns a chore, which isn't how scavenging should make you feel. To be fair, I don't recall whether this was an issue at Shadow of Chernobyl's release, or whether it's a byproduct of being run on a modern system, but it is something current players must grapple with. Shadow of Chernobyl shipped with multiplayer, but I'm not covering that. Multiplayer had interesting ideas, but the result was threadbare. Multiplayer isn't the core appeal of Shadow of Chernobyl, and it isn't part of Stalker's identity. I'd wager that many fans forgot it existed. And before anyone gets frisky in the comments, yeah, co-op Stalker would be amazing. That brings us to the end of the gameplay section, and to the end of the video. Plot analysis and Stalker's legacy are coming in part 3. If you liked the video and have done the needful and subscribed, ring the ding-a-ling so you're notified when part 3 drops. Patron early birds get access to these videos at least a day before they're public, and they have first dibs on the comments, those lucky ducks. Speaking of which, a fistful of thank yous to my awesome patrons who brought you this video. Patron support means that my cheeky is always breaky. Patrons get exclusive perks like their name in the credits, regular updates, verbal thank yous at the end of my videos, and even a bespoke copy of the script for this video, as a way of saying thanks. If you'd like to see your name here or want to support the channel, there's a link to my Patreon in the description. As mentioned earlier, a link to my long play channel Blondfire is also in the description, if you like that sort of thing. I have 2 Stalker series on Blondfire, with more Stalker planned once I've finished playing Valheim, including Stalker 2 when it eventually releases. If you enjoyed this video, then crotch shot that like button with a Gauss rifle, and subscribe to the channel. If and you'd be so kind, throw the Blondie experience into the nearest anomaly, let it erupt across this expansive zona, remember the cant. Sharing the video helps, let's get more people excited for Stalker. Until part 3, partners.